everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. I wanted to take just a few minutes to go over the fingerprint assignments that you had this week, and just to review some things about the types of classifications, the prints, and also the minutia patterns. You are having a quiz tomorrow on Friday, May 8th, that covers the introductory material as well as those patterns and minutia patterns. So just to go through the POGIL first, just going through the answers here. I believe that's all I have scanned in. Yeah. So what we're looking at here is first with visualization, and you also had a video. We'll review this at some point next week, probably on Tuesday. But the main idea with visualization is that the surface that the print is on is going to determine what technique you'll use. So basically, is it porous or non-porous? Porous means, think of it as being absorbent. So like paper, cardboard, like question number 4, fabrics, money, things like that. Non-porous would be something like glass or tile, wood that's been treated with like a clear coat, so it's not going to soak up water. The fingerprints that don't need any type of visualization technique would be visible or plastic because you can see them. All right. So if you have a visible print, you had some type of substance on your hands that left the print behind. Think about like finger painting. Okay. If you had paint on your hands and you put it on a piece of paper, you could leave your print behind. Plastic prints would be more like an impression. So if you were to actually push your fingerprints into a softer substance like a wax, dried up sticky blood, that would be a plastic print and would leave that pattern there. So number 3 is dealing with a non-porous substance. This is going to be dusting, super glue fuming, anything that leaves a layer of developing substance on top of that print. Okay, it is not a chemical reaction. You're simply covering it with dust or covering it with the substance in the super glue, the cyanoacrylate ester that you saw in the video. That substance will stick to the print. For number 4, this is where you're going to have a chemical reaction with the iodine fuming or the ninhydrin. So that would be more for that absorbent surface. And you saw a demonstration with the iodine fuming. It's a very quick reaction. It is temporary, so they do have to make sure they photograph it and try to fix it chemically. We got our minutia patterns. We got our overall patterns in general. So just to review, our 3 basic types of fingerprints would be loops, arches, and whorls. Arches being the least common, loops being the most common. The arch could either be a plain or tented arch. The tented arch is more of a steeper arch, and many times you'll see a bit of a vertical line right down the middle. Kind of, they call it tented if you think like, the old school tents where it was literally like a pole in the middle of an area with a tarp over it. You have that vertical pole or line right here holding up the rest of that arch. The plain arch, kind of like a subtle hill going on. The loops, we'll get back to loops with the ulna versus the radial. For our whorls, we have 4 different types of whorls, but most important, recognize it's a whorl. You have the plain whorl, which looks like a bullseye. You have a central pocket loop, which sort of looks like the bullseye, but if you notice, there's a closing off of that circle. Those lines are not going all the way around to make a complete circle. They do get pinched off, and they have a little line that kind of leads up to it. The double loop, I described this on Monday as kind of being like the yin-yang symbol, where you have one loop folding over the other loop. And an accidental is just a combination. So this one kind of looks like a plain whorl, but then in the middle there, we see that there's a loop where it closes off and it loops back. So we'll talk about those particular patterns. The delta is that kind of that intersection of 3 different ridge patterns, of those ridges coming in from 3 different directions. The whorl pattern will have 2 deltas, and the loop pattern will have 1. So if you look at your own fingerprints, you might be able to see what patterns you have. A very simple way of seeing your patterns if you don't have an ink pad, if you take a pencil and just rub that pencil on a piece of paper, get a whole bunch of graphite onto the paper, and then roll your finger in that graphite, and you can use that kind of as an ink pad. Then just roll your finger on a piece of paper, and you'll be able to see the patterns there. Oops, sorry about that. Number 6, are fingerprints the only type of skin print? No, we saw in the Poly class kidnapping video that palm prints can be used. And that was how they actually placed the perpetrator at the crime scene, was by his palm print that he left behind. There are also studies of lip prints, which I think a couple people might have looked up, which is great. Also ear prints, your earlobe. They're noticing this on cell phones. So they're able to see, maybe some little ridges or wrinkles that you would have in your ear. Your foot could also have ridge patterns. So toe prints, footprints, things like that. There are different, studies that are being done. All right, now we got our minutia patterns. So when we look at these, there's a couple of these where there's multiple answers that are possible based on if you only use this POGIL or if you use the PowerPoint as well. The bifurcation is the fork in the road. For this worksheet, I believe they refer to this as a double bifurcation. It's also called a trifurcation because of the 3 ridges coming off. Over here to the right, this was focusing more on the ridge ending. I know some people did put a short ridge in. You'll see in a little bit how it would be different, but this was focusing on the ridge ending. We have a hook or a spur. I believe this packet had the term spur. You have a lake or an enclosure, which looks like a bubble. You have an island or a short ridge. A short ridge would be where you can see the beginning and the end of that ridge in a small area. You have a bridge. You got the crossover over here, which isn't as common. There is one more pattern that is in the PowerPoint that was not in this packet, and that's the break. And we're going to see that down here. And I did add that to your POGILs. I did type that in as well, that the break is going to be something that we'll see. So let me zoom in on this so we can see the patterns a little bit easier. Oh. Okay, this is going a little bit slower now. So the first minutia pattern was the ridge ending. So you had the end of the ridge here. There's actually 2 ridge endings within that circle. Number 2 was at the center of the whorl pattern. Some of you did write down a plain whorl, which is the overall pattern. This specific area is the core. We talked about the core and the delta during Monday's lesson with the ridge counts. That's something you want to review. Okay, so the core and the delta, these 2 parts of the whorl and the loop, extremely important. I'll review that next week on Monday during the live lesson as we wrap up the topic. Number 3 is our lake or our enclosure. I know over here I kind of went over a little bit. We do have some breaks here as well, but we're focusing on that bubble shape there. Number 4, top right, we had a bifurcation. So you had that one ridge coming in and then it splits into 2. This is our break. I know many people did put ridge ending, and this is where I just added in the word break because I did want you to, make that connection from the PowerPoint as well, that we do have that pattern. The break is significantly different from the ridge ending because the line does end, the ridge ends, except it continues right back up. So you can see how one ridge ends and there's a little gap, but then it picks right back up. So if it was just a regular ridge ending, it would stop and that would be it. That'd be the end of the story. But we can see how the ridge does end, but it starts up right again. And then over here, we have one of our deltas. Our other delta is right down over here in the left corner. Since we do have a whorl, we have 2 deltas. And just to review what I was talking about with the ridge counts, If you were to draw a line from the core to the delta and count the number of ridges you cross, that is a ridge count. And depending on the number of deltas, that determines if you have a left ridge count or a right ridge count. And in this case with the whorl, you got both. So what I have circled here, the core and the delta over here, that would be a right ridge count since the delta is to the right side of the core. And you always have plus or minus a few ridges with the pattern because, some people might start in that white section of the delta there. Some people might start right on the ridge itself. So again, there is a little bit of leeway with that, so no worries with that. Okay, and last but not least, just the patterns. I want to talk a little bit about the patterns. Again, please, if you haven't, check that video posted from Monday's live lesson where I walked us through the different patterns. Overall, we did okay, but there were definitely some that we had some confusion with. So first off, plain whorl, looks like a bullseye. Okay, this is where we see the lines going all the way around that core. So if you see lots of concentric circles going all the way, kind of spiraling around, you have a plain whorl. I'm going to skip down and stick with the whorl pattern. So we're staying consistent with our, with one pattern at a time. All the way to the right side here in the second row, you have another plain whorl because again, circles going all the way around. On the left, the first pattern, that is a double loop. So if you take a look, you have a loop going upwards and returning back down. And then over here, you have that other loop that folds over and goes back. So you have those two separate loop patterns. It is a double loop. It classifies as a whorl. And in the bottom row, we have ourselves another plain whorl with the second one in. The third pattern, this is our central pocket because we have that circular pattern. We could see that core, but this area right here, this is where we have that line and it closes off. So if you notice, if I were to look just over here, it kind of looks like a loop because the lines are coming in and out of the same place. But the fact that I have the circular pattern in the middle, that is giving us the pattern of a whorl because it does close off. It is a circular pattern in the center. So when you see that circular pattern and that line, that single line coming off, that does not allow the circular lines to continue all the way around. That's your central pocket loop. Over here on the right side, we have an accidental. All right, I got it looks like a central pocket loop a little bit because it closes off. But then that line wraps over and around and I see a loop right in the middle over there that's folded over the top. So we have a combination of patterns there for an accidental. Let's talk about our arches. Second row, we have a tented arch because we do have a bit of that vertical line. And in the top row, number 3, we have a plain arch. All right, we said kind of like a slow, gradual hill. All right, so now the loops, ulna versus radial. Ulna and radial loops depend on what hand made the print. So in the directions, you were told that all prints were made from the right hand. So this particular loop here in the first row, second print, this loop starts from the right side and opens up and right back on the right side. So those lines go up and around. They don't continue through around that core. So we have our loop opening up. That's how we would describe it. We would say that this loop opens up to the right. Okay, because the bottom of that loop is to the right side. Delta's on the other side, but the opening of that loop is to the right. Now, since this print was made by a right hand, I want you to take your right hands and put it up to the screen, your phone, your laptop, your computer, whatever. And you can see that since the bottom of that loop opens up towards the right side of your hand, doesn't matter which finger made the print, but since it opens up towards the right side of your hand, that's your little finger. That's where the ulna bone is. So that's going to be an ulna loop because it opens up towards the little finger. In the second row, we have an ulna loop again because we have that loop opening up. Here's the opening of the loop. It's going towards the right, and towards the right-hand side of your right hand is your little finger, so that's your ulna loop. And then in the third row here, we have a radial loop because if you put your right hands up next to it, we have the opening of the loop at the bottom left, and that is where our thumb would be. And you have the radius. You have that radius bone going down the left-hand side of your arm, lining up with the thumb. So that would be a radial loop. Okay. If you have any questions on the patterns or the minutia or anything, please message me as soon as possible, so you can take care of that for your quiz tomorrow. It will again be on your test next week, so I can always review again with you after the quiz, after you get your grades back for that. And that's pretty much it for now. I just wanted to go over those assignments from earlier this week just to make sure that we're all up to date. And again, as always, my advice, complete the work. Okay, make sure you are completing the work. Syracuse is still looking at all that stuff. They're looking at those grades, and we obviously want the highest numerical grade we can possibly have. So just keep completing the work. It's all good. Go back to your old assignments and make sure you have a grade for every old assignment. Once you have a grade plugged in there, then you know you completed the work. If you see zeros, it means that the work was not completed when I looked it over. So just want to give you guys that heads up. Otherwise, you guys are all good to go.